Hello and welcome in. It's echohack and I'm back with another Diablo Immortal guide for you, getting you prepared for the beta, which was just announced. Today I have the Crusader guide. Now the Crusader is very close to my heart. I've played over 500 hours on the Crusader alone. And this guide's going to help you as a Crusader be very successful. It's also going to help you if you're just new to the game and you want to find out if you want to even play a Crusader. As you know, that playing a class in Diablo Immortal is it's a big decision. You're not going to be swapping classes a lot like you do in other Diablo games. So let's get straight into the guide. Now, the Crusader's class identity. The Crusader charges forward on their glorious celestial steed, leading your party with high area of effect damage, incredible speed, and party-wide buffs. As a Crusader, you will quickly crush groups of weak enemies, as almost every skill at your disposal excels at AoE-based DPS. Now, this guide is a shield against the demonic hordes, teaching you to be the best Crusader possible. So let's dive into some strengths. Crusaders are a melee and AoE damage based powerhouse with the fastest overall movement speed in the game. Most Crusader builds rely on draw and quarter as their main skill to move around and deal damage. The primary attack given by draw and quarter, when combined with legendary items such as Besieger and Bladed Jumbo, enable draw and quarter alone to demolish waves of enemies. If damage becomes a problem, the Crusader has defensive skills such as Punish for improved block chance, or Conjuration of Light to make you and your party invulnerable for a short duration. In a party, Crusaders can use Holy Banner, giving all nearby party members a 100% critical hit chance for a short duration. Crusaders also fill party role as a scout, dealing AoE damage to trash mobs, triggering events, and pulling enemies together. In PvP, Crusaders have an impressive kit of stuns, interrupts, and dashes, such as Sacred Chain, Shield Charge, or Falling Sword with Little Lance. Overall, Crusaders are a top-tier choice for their high AoE damage, incredible movement speed, impressive defensive skills, effective party-wide buffs, and a wide array of PvP skills. Now let's dive into some weaknesses. The Crusader's reliance on Draw and Quarter exposes some weaknesses of the class. Draw and Quarter is vulnerable to stuns and interrupts, causing you to immediately lose the entire duration. Most builds with Draw and Quarter rely on casting other skills before casting Draw and Quarter, further decreasing your damage during stuns and interrupts for your entire build. Finally, using Draw and Quarter for movement means that when it is on cooldown, you have no options for escape. Since you are a melee class, relying only on Draw and Quarter for escape can make it easy to become trapped and make it difficult to dodge ranged attacks. Crusaders have poor single target damage and high cooldown duration skills. This leads to many situations where all of your skills are on cooldown, leaving you with only your lackluster primary skill. As a result, certain bosses can be difficult to kill in challenge rifts. Finally, as the scout for the party, you will be put in situations where you must push far ahead of the party in order to advance a dungeon. This can mean giving up a portion of loot that drops in the ground, since you are tasked with pushing forward. This results in roughly a 20% loss of the salvage materials when compared to other party members. Starting your Crusader off on the right foot is key in order to make your character as powerful as possible. So this list is a quick list of tips and tricks in order to get you going real fast. First of all, find better equipment for your character. Your bag icon will flash when you pick up better equipment. Upgrade your equipment at the blacksmith. Turn on auto pickup for all item types in the settings, and periodically remember to return to town to salvage. Unlock and use Draw and Quarter at level 13. When you cast Draw and Quarter, you hold down the primary attack button to attack while moving at the same time. Don't forget to hold down that primary attack button. Claim the Battle Pass legendary item. Now the Battle Pass will give you a legendary item that increases your character's power early on. Choose very wisely. Hunt legendary items. Keep a special eye out for Sivket's Advantage, Karawan's Catch, Besieger, Bladed Jumbo, Pavice of 10 Wings, Bonebearer, and Tumult. Find normal and legendary gems. Hidden layers have a chance to drop normal gems, and if you use a crest, Elder Rifts have a chance to drop legendary gems. Unlock the Heliquary at level 41. Try to unlock the Heliquary as soon as you can, so you can always receive Scoria from your daily bounties. Now let's talk about a few draw and quarter oriented builds for the Crusader. Now, during the closed alpha, draw and quarter and different variants around draw and quarter are the Crusader's strongest builds. So all of these variants that we're going to talk about are, roughly have the same build base, but they can actually vary significantly in their gameplay depending on what situation you're in. So first of all, we have solo farming, and this is draw and quarter plus Karawan's catch. This is definitely the best build for farming. So Karawan's catch gives the Crusader the ability to deal all of your damage while moving. You'll devastate enemy groups so fast that you'll actually need to plan routes around how fast you can pick the loot up as it drops. Since you're never going to stop moving, chaining massacre bonuses is easy. More massacre bonuses means more experience points, and faster monster kills means more loot. Moving from objective to objective with this variant simply becomes a question of how many enemies do I want to kill along the way. So for skills, we're going to use Sacred Fire as our primary attack, Draw and Quarter, Sweep Attack, Consecrate, and Spinning Shield. For our legendary items, we're going to use Karawan's Catch. This makes Sweep Attack do a close-ranged AoE charge attack. For our offhand, we're going to use the Pavice of 10 Wings. Spinning Shield instead will spiral out from your character, covering the entire screen for large ranged AoE damage. For our helm, we're going to use the Many-Eyed Aegis. Consecrate will now move with your character. For the shoulder, we're going to use Civkit's Advantage. Draw and quarter duration is increased by 20%. This is important because in effect, it increases the duration of other draw and quarter powers. For the chest, we're going to use Besieger. Draw and quarter will randomly drop bombs on nearby enemies. And for your pants, Bladed Jambao. Draw and quarter will now leave behind a trail of fiery in its wake. Lure enemies to run behind you to deal damage on the move. Now for group farming, we're essentially going to take the solo farming build. We're going to copy and paste it over, except we're going to switch out the helm. And we're going to switch out one ability, which is Consecrate. So we're going to take off Consecrate, we're going to replace that with Holy Banner. And what Holy Banner does is it does a large group buff that's centered on your character when you're using the Helm Arrow Keeper. Most importantly, this is going to increase all of your party members' critical chance by 100%. Now focus on keeping your entire party in the area of effect, rather than purely doing damage with other abilities. Sometimes staying alive and allowing other party members to deal damage safely at range in this effect is smarter than actually trying to deal damage yourself. Now, Arrow Keeper itself is actually really important. It actually entirely removes the Holy Banner from the field, meaning that the Holy Banner can't die, and the bonus effect of critical hit chance will be up at all times. Now for boss killing and for challenge rifts, we have one great variant. This is a fantastic variant. Basically, you're going to get a huge laser beam with Bonebearer. So the Bonebearer variant packs significant damage with ranged AoE attacks while remaining safe. This is really the Crusader's only real ranged AoE attack in the entire game. So unlike other draw and quarter based variants, this variant requires good positioning and grouping packs of enemies together with the significant advantage of staying safely away from enemy attacks while you do damage. You often need to sit down to deal damage due to Bonebearer's 1 second wind-up time, which will require good positioning. Now, since Challenge Rift bosses and Heliquary bosses can require good positioning and avoiding damage, this variant is one of the best picks for these game modes. Let's dive into the skills. Sacred Fire for your primary attack. Draw and Quarter, Shield Glare, Consecrate, Falling Sword. Now for the items, for our main hand, we're going to use Tumult. This allows Falling Sword to do a large targetable AoE. This is really important because normally Consecrate is an AoE that's centered around your character. So since the AoE is targetable, you can be at range and toss it across the screen without having to worry about getting close to your enemies. For your offhand, and this is really important, Bonebearer. Shield Glare now fires a laser, doing AoE damage in a straight line. There's a significant wind-up cost about 1 second before the laser fires, so remember that when you fire the ability. You really have to hold this button down. For the helm, we're going to use Redeemer's Medal. Shield Glare radius increases 20%. Now, you might not think that this actually works, but it does widen the laser beam a significant amount with Bonebearer. For the shoulder, we're going to use Civ Kit's Advantage, which increases drawn quarter duration by 20%. For the chest, we're going to use Besieger, which will randomly drop bombs on nearby enemies with drawn quarter. And for the pants, we're going to use Bladed Gem Bow, which drawn quarter will now leave behind a trail of fiery in its wake. Now let's talk about some of the Crusader skills. So the Crusader has 2 primary attacks. The first one is Punish, and in a way, Punish is actually the better of the 2. And the reason why is Punish gives you something called Hardened Senses. Hardened Senses, it increases your block chance by 30% for 2 seconds. So the Crusader's primary attacks are actually very, very weak compared to some other classes. And so really, you're going to use this less for damage, maybe some filler damage here and there, but you're going to be using this more to protect yourself. Now you also have Sacred Fire. Sacred Fire is a AoE primary attack compared to Punish, which is more of a single target primary attack. And it ignites the air in front of you with holy flames from your weapon, dealing damage to an enemy and 25% as much to all the other enemies in front of you. This can be more useful for your farming builds or in scenarios where damage is far more important in AoE compared to Punish. But in general, Punish is a lot better, especially Punish's ultimate ability, which just lets you wail on a boss. Since Crusaders have a lot of trouble with bosses, Punish is usually the right pick. All right, next up we have Condemn. Now Condemn doesn't see a lot of use, unfortunately. You build up a massive explosion, dealing damage to all nearby enemies after 3 seconds. And 3 seconds in this game is a very, very long time. That's why you don't really use Condemn very much, except for maybe in PvP if you're using the chest Iron Suzerain. And what Iron Suzerain does is it allows Condemn to continuously drag enemies towards you. And that constantly will interrupt enemies. That's why it's so useful in PvP. Next up, we have Conjuration of Light. Conjuration of Light is definitely one of those group-based abilities that you want to be thinking about using in a group. You call down a beam of holy light from the heavens, protecting you and all nearby allies with damage immunity for 3 seconds. Very useful in group play, but most of all, you really want the chest and maybe the shoulder. So the chest is called Justice Without Favor. Conjuration of Light surrounds you and your allies with holy fire that continually damages all nearby enemies, but no longer prevents damage. And the shoulder, When Blessed Pauldrons, allows Conjuration of Light duration to be increased by 30%. So you increase both of those, and you might be doing a lot of damage, especially in dungeons where you have a lot of enemies that are in close proximity to your allies. Alright, now we have almost an auto-include in every single build. It's very, very good. Consecrate. It's could be the best AoE skill in the entire game. So Consecrate consecrates the ground around you, dealing damage to all nearby enemies over 6 seconds. It has a massive range. I think it's about 10 yards in Diablo Immortal terms. It has a helmet called the Many-Eyed Aegis that allows the Consecration to move with you. So what you can do is you can cast Consecrate, and then you can cast other skills like Draw and Quarter, and you can move with the Consecrate with you while you're still mounted up. It's amazing. You also have a not-so-great offhand called Zalnula's Last Hymn. Consecrate also slows enemy movement by 30%. I've never really used this one. It's not really that useful. All right, the most important ability for any Crusader is draw and quarter. If you play Crusader, you're going to become a master of draw and quarter. You're going to know everything about this skill because it is absolutely important. And I'm going to read the entire description to you here because it's going to blow your mind. It's actually the most overpowered skill I've ever heard of in any single game. It's incredible. Mount a Celestial Warhorse for 6 seconds, dispelling all movement impairing effects, increasing your movement speed by 65%, and replacing your primary attack with a strike. Holy Chains, bind up to 8 nearby monsters and drag them with you as you ride. It's, wow, incredible. It's a staple of every single build. And what's really important about Draw and Quarter is you want to use other skills that move with you before using Draw and Quarter. So there's another note here is that the special strike that replaces the primary attack counts as a primary attack when you're reading gear upgrades and Reforged family bonuses, right? So there's a lot of these other bonuses in the game that will say, you know, adds 6% damage to primary attacks. Well, that affects the Draw and Quarter strike. That counts as a primary attack. So one thing to know that's really important about this build is that if you're stunned or interrupted while you're on the horse, the rest of the duration of Draw and Quarter is completely lost. You're dismounted, and that's it. So you gotta be skillful. You gotta know how to avoid stuns and interruptions while you're in PvE or PvP situations. Now, Draw and Quarter has 5 legendary items. It's incredible. First of all, it has a chest called Besieger. Draw and Quarter periodically calls down a bombardment for damage to nearby enemies, which is very good. It has a shoulder called Civkit's Advantage. Draw and Quarter duration increased by 30%. Low key, what that does is it makes Draw and Quarter from 6 seconds to 8 seconds. It's 2 more seconds of Draw and Quarter is madness. It's so good. As soon as you get Civkit's Advantage, you probably will never equip another shoulder piece. It's so good. For your legs, you have actually 3 choices, and one is a bit of a meme choice. The other 2 are actually pretty good. Bladed Jumbo, which I think is the best of the 3. Your mount becomes a fiery steed that burns the ground and enemies, but it no longer drags enemies. This is, if you get this one early on, count yourself lucky. It's so good. Cavalier's Courtwear. Draw and Quarter now damages enemies when you run over them and knocks them away, but it no longer drags enemies. So essentially, now you're charging and just ramming into enemies with your horse, and it does this like constant stun effect, and it's incredible in PvP. You can just kill anybody with it. The meme legendary is the Squire's Trues. You can now carry a passenger during Draw and Quarter. It's cute. It's not good. Okay, next up we have Falling Sword. Now, Falling Sword overall is not that great of an ability. It has a couple of cute legendary powers, though, that can situationally make it good, but most of the time you're not going to be using this ability. So what Falling Sword does is it impales a holy sword at a location where it deals damage over 5 seconds to nearby enemies. Once you activate it again, you teleport to it by jumping up in the air and coming crashing down at the sword's location, dealing damage to all nearby enemies and retrieving the sword. So you have a shoulder piece called Faith Ascendant, which deals 10% increased damage for a few seconds after using either stage of Falling Sword. Not that great, especially because that shoulder slot can be used for Civkit's Advantage. And then you have 4 main hands, 4 different mutually exclusive choices for this ability. So you can use Air Splitter. Falling Sword instead unleashes a shockwave that can be charged up to increase range and damage. This one's not that great. Little Lance, Falling Sword instead causes you to surge forward with your sword up to 3 times, damaging all enemies in your path. Now, this one, I don't think it's that good, especially in PvE, but we might see it be very useful in PvP because it makes you very agile on the battlefield. We'll see in the beta if it is actually any good. Proof from all high. Fallen Sword now chains enemies to a location and pulls them to you when activated again. Not good at all. Absolutely terrible. Would never use it. Tumult. Fallen Sword now summons a storm of blades around it, continually damaging all nearby enemies, but can no longer be activated again for movement. This basically turns Falling Sword into Consecrate, but slightly worse. But it has one main difference with Consecrate in that you can actually target where the AoE goes. So it's actually more useful in some builds, and also the ability for Consecrate to be cast is on a different slot. It's on that helm slot. That's what allows Consecrate to move with you, whereas this is on your main hand slot. So depending on your build, this can actually fit in and do a lot of damage, especially, of course, early on when you don't have all the legendary powers and that sort of thing. Tumult is a pretty good choice. It does good AoE damage. Use that and Consecrate at the same time while you're leveling. Pretty nice. Okay, next up we have Holy Banner. We've already talked about Holy Banner a little bit, but essentially the main thing to know about Holy Banner is that it allows all of your allies to have 100% crit chance while they're in the radius of effect. The other thing to know about, a little detail, is that it decreases the critical hit damage to 150% instead of double. Now, your allies get more critical hit damage based on their critical hit chance. So let's say someone else in your team is playing a Demon Hunter and they have a critical hit chance of 30%, right? So now the critical hit damage they do is 180%. So you can actually make this fantastic for your allies. Now, you have three options here for legendary items. You have the Arrow Keeper. But these are all helms, by the way. So the inspiration from Holy Banner now moves with you. The description there is a little bit lackluster because not only does the inspiration from Holy Banner move with you, but the banner itself does not cast on the ground. So enemies can't destroy it, which is one of the main weaknesses of Holy Banner. So Arrow Keeper secretly is like really amazing. You wouldn't think though by reading it that it's actually really good. You have Retribution Ornament. Holy Banner is replaced with a holy statue that forces all nearby enemies to attack it. This is situationally useful if you're pushing challenge rifts, maybe. Maybe useful in Path of Blood or something, but otherwise not that great. And then you have Sudden Velation. Holy Banner instead plants a holy beacon that continually damages enemies with holy light. Now this actually does pretty good damage. We tested the damage out of Sudden Velation a lot. Unfortunately, it does put this beacon on the ground that has health, so enemies can attack and kill it. So a lot of times you would love to have the full duration of the damage, but a lot of times enemies will just kill the beacon. So a lot of times it's better just to swap for Consecrate if you're trying to have like an AoE effect. All right, we have Judgment. Now Judgment is one of the least and weakest skills that the Crusader has. It's really one of the worst skills. Here's what it does, just so you know. You pass Judgment on all enemies within an area, dealing damage and slowing them by 50% for 3 seconds. The center of the area explodes after a short time, dealing damage to all nearby enemies and stunning them for 3 seconds, right? So has a slow, damage, stun. Yeah, and yeah, it's not that great. Now you have a chest called Feathermere Coat, which increases the damage from Judgment by 10%. Not that great. You have a shoulder called the Barbed Council. Judgment now implodes after a short delay, drawing all nearby enemies to its center, but no longer slows movement or stuns. This might be good for grouping enemies, but there's a lot of classes that group enemies a lot better than Crusader. Namely, the Monk does a much better job. And so I don't know why I would use this. And then finally, you have Cradle of Pebbles as a shoulder. Judgment instead summons a Guardian of Justice to fight for you. This can be good in order to tank a little bit for you in challenge rifts, maybe. Otherwise, not very useful. All right, we have Sacred Chain up next. Now, Sacred Chain is the PvP skill for Crusaders. So this is how Sacred Chain works. You throw holy chains that bounce between enemies, striking up to 6 targets and dealing damage to each. The chains stun enemies for 8 seconds, but are dispelled by damage. Duration's reduced to 3 seconds on players. Now, you have 2 options, both on the shoulder slot. First of all, you have Public Penance. Sacred Chain now throws frozen chains that deal more damage and do not break from damage, but have a shorter duration. This is what I would pick in PvP, is the Public Penance. And then you have Spine of the Adversary. Sacred Chain now also causes chained enemies to take a percentage of all damage taken by any other chained enemy, but no longer stuns. We really didn't get this to work very well in the closed alpha. We might see some use of Spine of the Adversary in the closed beta if enemies are have more like damage sponge mechanics. We didn't really see a lot of damage sponge mechanics in the closed alpha, but I'm kind of expecting that to change a little bit in the closed beta. We'll see. All right, next up we have Shield Charge. Shield Charge is a pretty fun skill, and also situationally useful in PvP. You charge forward with your shield, pushing all enemies in your path and inflicting damage. Enemies colliding with terrain will be stunned for 3 seconds. Now, you have a whole bunch of choices here for legendary items. For chest, you have the Hunger Fire Chitin. Shield Charge also unleashes a shockwave at its destination, dealing damage to all nearby enemies. Not that great. Maybe for a PvP build, maybe. For your head, Quester's Mine. Shield Charge maximum charges increased by 1. Definitely a PvP choice. There's a certain PvP build that focuses on Shield Charge. This would be what I would put in that build. For legs, you have the Pillager's Greaves. Shield Charge damage is increased, and Shield Charge can be charged up further to increase damage. Not that good. And then you also have Shield Swath. Shield Charge now charges to a location where it forms a shielded circle that enemies and their projectiles cannot cross. Again, not that good. Alright, we have Shield Glare. Now overall, this isn't a very good ability, but there is one amazing legendary that we'll talk about. Unleash a powerful attack that deals damage to all enemies in front of you, causing them to bleed over 3 seconds, maximum of 3 charges. Now this offers some quick AoE damage and an interrupt. You've got 3 choices for legendary items. You got a head with Redeemer's Medal. Shield Glare radius is increased by 20%. By itself, not great, but with Bonebearer, which is our offhand item, is fantastic. Bonebearer is a shield. So Shield Glare now consumes energy to reflect a beam of light that continually damages enemies in a direction, but no longer blinds enemies. If you have no legendary items in the entire game, and you could only get 1 to start out with, right? I would pick Bonebearer. Bonebearer is probably the best by itself legendary item for the Crusader in the entire game. It is absolutely fantastic. You get a giant laser from Shield Glare. It is so good. It lets you do challenge rifts that you could have never done before. It lets you stand at range and just laser enemies to doom. It's incredible. And then finally, you have Constant Scrutiny. Shield Glare now blinds and damages all enemies around you. Not that good, not worth it. All right, finally we have Spinning Shield. So Spinning Shield is actually a really good skill with a couple of really good legendaries. You're going to be using Spinning Shield in several of your Crusader builds. So here's what it does. It hurls a Spinning Shield, inflicting damage to all enemies in its path. The shield will return to you, pulling enemies in its path to you and dealing additional damage, maximum of 3 charges. Players can only be affected by Spinning Shield once every 3 seconds. Now, because the Crusader has very few ranged single target damage skills, Spinning Shield is highly useful as a part of your kit. Now for the chest, you have Springback Chains. Spinning Shield damage is increased by 10%. If you have nothing else for your chest, use this, obviously, but otherwise, this isn't that good. For your offhand, you have 4 choices. There's a lot of choices here. You have Bowyer's Remorse. Spinning Shield now explodes when it strikes an enemy instead of returning, damaging all nearby enemies and knocking them away. Not that good. I wouldn't pick this one. Pervasive 10 wings. Spinning shield now spirals around you and does not return. This one is incredible. It's basically a super powerful blessed hammer is kind of the way to think about this. It does a ton of damage. It spirals around your character, which means you can actually cast all three very quickly, hit draw and quarter, and keep moving, and the shields will move with you, right? And it'll just kill everything on the screen. It's incredible. You have Pouncing Shield. Spinning Shield now bounces between several enemies instead of returning to you. Early on, it does good damage, but this falls off, especially with bosses. Pouncing Shield is just... It's good, but compared to some of these other choices like Pavise, it's just subpar. And then finally we have Sinkhole Cross. Spinning Shield hovers at a location, damaging enemies and reducing their movement speed. It does 10 ticks of damage. So if you can get this on a boss, then this can actually do some pretty good boss damage. So if you have no other options, especially early on, Sinkhole Cross can actually be a really good option for you. Okay, last skill, we have Sweep Attack. Now, Sweep Attack is overall pretty lackluster, but let's take a look at it. So, sweep a mystical flail through enemies in front of you, dealing damage. Charging longer increases range and damage. When fully charged, Sweep Attack will also knock enemies away. Now, it's useful only because it has one very good legendary item, and that legendary item is your main hand, Karawan's Catch. Sweep Attack now consumes energy to continually damage all nearby enemies while you move. So this is fantastic. It basically gives you Whirlwind as a Crusader. It's not quite as good as Barbarian's Whirlwind, but combined with all of your other AoE abilities, makes you just like this ridiculous AoE powerhouse. You also have Long Palm as a main hand. Sweep Attack now strikes all enemies, all nearby enemies. Not that good. I wouldn't take it. And then you have a helmet or a head. Glower of the Recluse. When an enemy is blinded, immobilized, or stunned, your Sweep Attack deals 15% more damage. Overall, not that great. We weren't able to find a really good use for it, but I don't know. Things can change in the beta. All right, now there are a couple of other things that we can talk about. There's normal gems, there's legendary gems, there's a whole bunch of legendary gems. There's a number of Paragon points and Paragon trees, but I think I'm going to try to cover these in other guides because they're probably going to be all the same, at least from the information we know right now from the closed alpha. I think in the closed beta, we're going to learn a lot more information where the details around which of these gems you're equipping, which Paragon points you're putting in matter a lot more. So we're expecting a lot of changes here. So I'll be posting a revised guide, towards the end of the closed beta of the Crusader that will have a lot more of these details in them and have them be correct. Now, in summary, Crusaders, remember, are a melee and AoE damage-based class with the fastest overall movement speed in the game. Crusaders excel at AoE damage, but are often outclassed by other classes at single target damage. And Draw and Quarter is one of the most important skills for Crusader, and it's important to take for nearly every build. Thanks for watching. Will you be playing Crusader in the closed beta? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.